life at the top of the G5 nations ensures a certain amount of privilege and power. It also brings its fair share of enemies. Born from an intercontinental alliance of old Earth that pioneered the race to the stars, Pano has led the transhuman revolution without ever once looking back. The hyperpower, all that glitters. Welcome to Personal Flash Paper. This is Season 4, Episode 3. I am your host, Randy Glenn, and with me, as always, Rob Baker.
Boom! That Baker kid coming at you out of Olathe, Kansas.
And Ryan Moore.
I just can't. I just can't.
Yeah, you can't follow that. You can't follow that.
Hi, everybody. How's it going?
We're gonna have to let Ryan go first and let just Rob just trickle in the end.
Roll off somewhere.
Yeah, right. So if you haven't guessed by the opening of this, we are talking about the hyperpower. We are talking about Pano and all things vanilla Pano this week on Personal Flash Paper, and this should be a good one. So we're going to kind of cover a little bit of the fluff, a little bit of our units that we like, and why you should want to pick up Pano right now. So let's get this train a-rolling. Pano's story is pretty, it's good. What do you guys think of, the second great space race of Pano and how they kind of came to be, and basically sticking it to everybody at some point in the story as it relates to Infinity?
Well, I'll go. So in preparation for this, I actually pulled out my handy dandy role-playing book because they have a lot of info on here. And I think one of the things that's really interesting is like the opening line on the Pano section is like, Panoceania is the hyperpower, the most prosperous, powerful than any other empire in the human history. It has total political control of the three entire system. It's really interesting to me because we, arrogant Americans think that that's the U.S., right? So America is one of the hyperpowers, or like one of the big current industry leaders, right?
Exactly.
You've got to remember, in Infinity World, the U.S., Russia, the French, who am I leaving out?
European Space Agency.
Yeah, so have all already gone. They flew to Dawn, right? That's Ariadne, and they got lost. So they are actually behind the eight ball. So these other groups filled in that gap. And what's pretty cool is Panoceania is not what we consider a hyperpower now in our time. So that's really shown that like they have really stepped up. To me, of course, Billy really put some thought into how nation states would change and how they would pull power and how they would, kind of manipulate stuff. So to me, that part is really cool because it's not what you would atypically think of as like, oh, well, of course, the Panoceanian area. So, you're talking about, the small islands in Southeast Asia area are like in control. And so I think it's put a nice little tick on creative license in a real world. Fluff wise, that's what really I think is really quite.
Yeah, I do like how they do explain that in the fluff that Pano was kind of this thing. They were doing all right. They were kind of, like meddling. And I know this is going to be a stretch for some people, but I agree with you, Ryan, that it is like it takes creative licensing from the real world. And I think of Pano as kind of like the United States pre-World War II. We're kind of there. We're like, whatever. And then all of a sudden we become this industrial, boom. And that's kind of what they did. Like, it's like, boom. And then they're off to the races. And I think it's cool. And of course, I know it's going to be a stretch for some people, but this is my hobby and I will see whatever I want in the fluff. So
yeah. Well, no, I think that analogy is right though. I mean, if you look at it, that analogy, I think is pretty accurate.
From my point of view, when, and Ryan, you've heard this spiel in tabletop game room, when people are coming in, they're watching us play the game, they're like, well, what game is this? And I'm like, oh, so have you seen, these things that are going on now, and use contemporary things that are going on? The United States is, quote unquote, the technological power. And then I tell them the story of how NASA finds a wormhole just on the outside of our solar system, and they send the probe through, they find Dawn, and NASA, the European Space Agency, the Russians, these traditional contemporary things that people can relate to, they understand that. And because they have that basic understanding, it's not a far fetch. it's, the understanding of that creative license that you guys are talking about, of these countries, these, world powers in 2020 pour economic resources. Oh, okay. And then what happens? Well, they find a Goldilocks planet. They find Dawn. And then, okay, what happens then? And they're like, yeah, they colonize it. They get, military people from all of these countries, which is why you've got U.S. Rangers, you've got SAS, you've got Spetsnaz, you've got these guys going through with the scientists, and they go through and they're like, yeah, we landed on Dawn. Everything's great. 5x5, send the resupply ship, and more economic things are, poured into this. And then the supply ship takes off. It's going through the wormhole. Everything's looking great. And then the wormhole collapses. And then the economic collapse happens. And that's where you get these, smaller, to Randy's point, the United States before World War II, before, the industrial complex really started to throw its weight around. And you get these rises. You get these, Australia rises, the Philippines rises. And then you have, Panoceania 175 years in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I really think that's a big deal with Pano's fluff, and the fact that and a fluff standpoint, so if you're a gamer looking at fluff and Pano, not only are they like that, but they also take a religious zealotry, and we'll dive into that eventually, but they have this knack for pulling all over and making little factions out of it. And in the upcoming weeks, we're going to discuss some of those factions. But Vanilla Pano, as it stands, is a really cool powerhouse type of force. And they play, which leads us to how they play on the tabletop. I think they play like they're fluff. Would you guys agree with that? I mean, or do you think that there's some skewing to it?
What do you mean by play like they're fluffed?
So to me, like, again, keeping the analogies, I think that Pano has the ability to kind of go all over the place. So in the fluff, they're like this elite. They can be this elite, Richie, buy the best, have the best, throw the best at you. But they also have the ability to kind of play from like the gutters, from the streets, from the ne'er-do-wells, the people that can actually where they can throw, in editions past, lots of orders at you, and now you could run a 7-8 command command list, or you could run a 15, and I think they can do well no matter how you want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I typically think of Pano, it's typically like everybody, like, so it's your common man, but we're giving him the best equipment, right? So it's not like, all right, here, Soldier A, we've got this, old BB gun, and you get to take that out. It's like everybody, okay, here's the top of the line M16. All right, here's the top of the line M16. Everybody's taking this weapon, right? So I think you're right in the fact that they can field really cheap dudes that aren't great, but have like the best equipment. So I mean, if I'm looking at them and think about they are a modern elite fighting force, and they are also your run of the mill. We are the line soldiers. We are the mass you see. We're equipped, right? It's not this hodgepodge of stuff going on, if that makes sense.
To me, that makes complete sense. And I think that also translates over into what Corvus Belli has done with their actual rule set. If you look, yes, they've got awesome armor. They've got awesome equipment. However, their willpower is not the best. I don't know if we're going to talk about games that we've played against Pano or, as Pano or anything like that. But the number of times that I have watched my opponents who are playing Pano try to flip a switch that is a willpower, and they just can't do it. To me, that fits with the fluff of we're more dependent on our technology. We're more dependent on our equipment than actually being able to do something. Or maybe it's the fizz that I'm thinking of. Yeah, it's the fizz.
No, well, you're both, right? So so fizz is low, but those are willpower's low. So I mean, there's an ongoing joke in the community. If you are new to the game, you probably haven't heard it. If you're old to the game, it's easy. One thing is, Pano doctors will kill more of their own troops, right? Because their willpower is really low, right? So they're going to heal somebody, and they a lot of times will kill. I play Pano. I have a bunch of Pano. I played for a while, and I guarantee that my Pano doctors have killed more people than they have healed. And well, the paramedics have killed more people.
They are
Right.
valedictorian, of
Yeah.
their medical school class.
However, on the opposite side, right, they have shot the heck out of more stuff than they should have.
Oh,
Opposites
the
should have
pain
totally
train
shot.
of those knights. Ugh.
Well, I'm
Yeah,
not even talking knight.
I
I'm
mean,
talking your basic fusilier, like your
True,
basic
true.
line trooper dude.
yeah. Well, that's the great thing about playing Pano, right? Like I know for if you're just starting into Infinity, this is all going to kind of sound a little foreign to you. If you're experienced, I know there's probably people driving in their car right now just shaking their head at that oh my god, the time a Fusilier like just wreck something, and you're like, what the hell is going on? But that's kind of Pano. Like they're kind of the I'm not going to say good guys, but if I had to pick a faction in all of Infinity that was, the standard bearer type of faction, I would say it's Pano.
Yeah, I mean that's the one thing I do like about Infinity is there are no good guys and bad guys, right? Because it depends on what you look at. Like for example, the combined army, they are portrayed as the bad guys in there, but if you look at the perspective, they've done more to unify everyone. Now, whether or not that is unification through subjection, through some, yeah, or if it's really, yeah, or if it's really, really unified, it's one of the things. But I think that everything they've done, like all of them outside of a few forces, like these guys are legitimately trying to do what's best for their nation, not we're trying to do this because we want to rule you. Now there are obviously some grays in there.
Oh
but,
yeah, there's shades
I think
of gray
that's the
all
cool
over.
thing.
Yeah,
but they really do play Pano as the good guys and the combined army as the bad guys. Now Eugene, Ariadna, Hakazlan people will argue on that, but I mean, I think that's the overarching thing that you kind of look at it like, but sure.
Well, going back to the fluff aspect, they developed Aleph, right, as part of their initiative to understand and make life easier. We need to make this artificial intelligence, and so to me, the fluff aspect of who the good guy is really skewed.
I think if you really want to go back to the fluff, if I'm not mistaken, it's a little hazy. I also think they created the EI. So
no, the EI is the evolved.
Yeah, because the Aleph was Aleph. Yes, Aleph was the second intelligence they created. The first one achieved what quote unquote enlightenment and left. Right.
And they don't know where.
And so that's where I think that's where it's the EI. That's combined. That's the evolved intelligence, right? So I don't know. I mean, I'm spinning some of that, but my thought process. So that's why like Aleph controls it. You can't have an AI that has some critical thinking pieces, right? There's constraints on the AI because the first one that was created, and I'm sure there are more people skilled in the fluff than I am easily that are going to be like, well, no, it wasn't Pano, it was this. But that idea or the overarching people in control, that's, I think, behind some of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's really where this boils down to. And changing it up a little bit, you both are really big on, I'll always say this, you guys are really great resources for new players in the hobby. I suck at this because I don't care. I zone out when people talk to me. I do it all the time. But you guys love getting new players. You guys love teaching the game. If I'm a new player and I'm standing in front of the wall, which is Infinity, of all the models, the great thing about Infinity is that the rule book, the rules are online. The bad thing is with Infinity is there's no codexes or books to really look at and pick your army when you're just kind of standing in front of things. So you kind of have to pick up boxes and discern what faction is what and what goes where and how that kind of works. If I'm a new player and I'm standing in front of the shelves, what is going to sell me on playing Pano? Like what is, what play style is the person that is going to want to pick up Pano?
So I think, and I'm going to lump Pano and Eugene in together here because I think both of them do this. I think those are more of your jack of all trades, right? Those will be the ones that are going to be like, you want to play, with a lot of cheap dudes, you can do that with either one. You want to play some with some really high tech dudes, you can do that with either one, right? So to me, those two factions, although they're not the same, like there are definitely some that there are definitely aspects of Yuching that are better than Pano and vice versa, right? I think those are two your most generic, I'm going to say run of the mill. That's a horrible way to describe them because they're not. Those are your probably most beginner friendly. You can pick a play style and make something work here than most of the ones. Like say, if you really like high tech and like really cool shooty sci-fi stuff, then Ariadna is not what you want to play, right? So,
Right.
but
Definitely.
you can get away with Pano and Eugene if you really want. Like if you're really like, I want the sci-fi combat special forces team, then Pano does that really well. And I want to shoot people, then Pano does that really well. And I want some people that have some armor that they can take some, then Pano does that really well. So I think as you talk to somebody new, you start delving in like, what do you want to, well, I really want to play close combat. Well, you can do that in Pano, but let's look at these army. Let's look at JSA. Let's look at Eugene because they have more people equipped to do that. But if you're like, I really want to sit back and just kill dudes as they come at me, have some just high armor dudes that have really cool tech weapons, then Pano has lots of great options. And I don't think you can go wrong starting with Pano because that's where I started actually, because they can be manipulated to flowing a little differently. Like you can manipulate your play style and get a little bit more out of them than you can say Ariadna, Hawk Islam to a point, right? They have some cool things, but they're not as high tech. I really think if you're like, I want to do this specifically, I just want to play sci-fi, but I don't really know like basically what path I want, what skill tree I want to go down. I think Pano is a really good spot to start.
Would you say that they're like a forgiving faction? So, I'm getting ready to pick this up. Would you say that it's a good beginner army, that it's forgiving if I make a mistake?
Oh, totally. At Pano, you can really you don't have to know all of the special rules. You don't have to rely on combos and setting people up. Now, there are things that are lacking. Like you're not going to be able to pull off what's known as the quote unquote smoke trick. Pano doesn't have smoke, so you're not going to use that. But they are very forgiving in like if you start going down a path and like this isn't working, you can switch a few models out and kind of massage your play style and actually get a lot out of it. It's not a complete 180 like, well, in some other games, well, I really wanted to play a shooting army, or let's say this is a better example. I really want to play a close combat army and not a shooting army, and I picked up, well, you made a mistake. Every model you bought is no longer valid. So that's not the case here.
And Randy, to your point of standing in front of the infinity wall, right, and looking at the boxes, trying to figure out what in Pano is what without having a fluff book to look at, that's a hard question. And I think that really can only be discerned of what you need to get by talking to people that are playing the game.
You bring up a good point there. The one thing that I don't like that Corvus Belli does is all the rules are free. Right,
but none of the fluff is.
But none of the fluff is. So the fluff, you have to buy the rule book, the fluff book. I really wish they would have produced a rule book and a fluff book that you could purchase together or separately, or I can just get the fluff book because I'm using the online rules, right? Sure. I think, there's a marketing thing there, so you have to kind of figure out how that works.
And Carlos did talk about that at one of the Adepticon, seminars, in that they really like having their rule set online so that they can change things. And we're seeing that with N4 with the fire team rules, right? The fire team rules are not going to be in N4 right away. It's going to be a PDF, down the road.
The PDF will be released on day one.
Oh, the PDF for fire team rules?
The fire team PDF will be released on rule release. So September 25th.
25th? Because the last I'd heard that it was going to be after.
Well, nope, he'd mentioned it a couple of times that they are active day one. They are doing it in a PDF so that they can change it a little more readily, have it outside the printed rulebook.
And that's the reason why that they don't put those type of rules in rulebooks, is because once it's in a rulebook, it's harder to change as opposed to being online. To your point, I would love to see more of the manga. Right? Betrayal, I'm only like 15 pages in because life is crazy and I got a lot of things going on, but Outrage was amazing. Betrayal so far is amazing. I would love to see more of that sort of thing hit the shelves. Just saying.
I mean, I completely agree with you, but since we're covering kind of like we're the noob cast, right? So I mean, that's kind of what we like to talk about is how to get new players into the game itself. So when we talk about it, and that's a challenge, I think, as a person who I really love Infinity. I love the game. I love everything how it works, but trying to talk somebody into with so many different symbols on boxes and how do you go about it? If I'm a new player, which I mean, I might as well be. So I'm the new player and I want to pick up Pano. What's a good strategy to start building my force in vanilla Pano?
Talked about it multiple times. I still think it's a valid argument to say the rule of cool, right? Like what models look cool to you because you're going to be inspired by that. What I think really is always look at your best bang for your buck. Right. So, for example, is there a starter set for the faction you want to play? And you can, even if the vanilla Pano set is not there, there's sectorial sets. Those are still valid, right? Starters, boxes. We talked a little bit about this the last cast, right? That's $40-$50 for a starter set. If, for example, Operation Ice Storm, which was the 2-player starter set, had Pano and Nomads. Now with Code 1, they are releasing, what are they calling those? Action packs, right? Those are great starters, and they're going to be completely vanilla faction set. So those are really good things to look at because you're going to get more models for your money at that point. You're going to have a larger variety. Probably have to buy less, right away. So it's very hard to pick up. I want this blister and I want this blister and I want this box set and I want this blister. That takes a lot more of understanding of how the game's played. So a starter set will be roughly currently about 150 points. And that's a great entryway to figure out how things play. And then from there, you can really start narrowing it down. So basically look at your wall of Infinity models and box sets and just start pulling them out. And then if there's somebody there that knows Infinity, ask them about it. I'm like, hey, I've got this box set and this box set. Can I play these together? And like somebody's like, nope, there's not a lot of cross compatibility there, and may be able to help guide you that way. There's several Facebook groups out there that are great on helping people kind of figure out. We are one of those Facebook groups at Personal Flash Paper, Personal Flash Paper at Infinity at Facebook, job. Right? Yeah. Throw something up there and we will help asking you. And we'll probably start by asking you some questions, right? And depending on how you answer those questions, we'll start massaging down what it is you're looking for, massaging down like what it is you want to play, and then figuring out how you can get the most for your money.
What do you think about it, Rob? I mean, you're really big. I know that Ryan played Pano way more than any of us have, but what do you think about getting somebody in, and where are you telling them to start? If not the rule of cool, what would be your suggestion?
I was literally trying to form a thought to dovetail in with Ryan because he covered so much of the good stuff. I think with the action packs and the way that they are appearing now, the entry level to play with Code 1, that action pack gets you in the game, right? Because Code 1 is a scaled down version. You don't have to go in full bore like we had to do for N3. So now with Code 1, you can buy that action pack. You can, spend the $50, $60 or whatever it is. You can get the most bang for your buck and then understand how the game works, how hackers work at a very, fundamental basal level. And then, to Ryan's point, buy those blister packs. Get those things that are, I need a rocket launcher. My opponent in the last game, he had a light rocket launcher and it just tore me up. And I talked with some of the other guys that were at the gaming night that night, and they, kibitzed about it. We talked about it, and I think this is the way that I want to go now. Well, you've got that action pack. Now you only need to buy 1 or 2 other blisters. You understand more of the game as you are progressing through that Code 1 evolution.
But be careful, Rob. That's a trap. Not every faction. Yeah. Well, I mean, not every faction has rocket launchers, right? Or missile launchers that are that it complete. For example, let's take Akari has a heavy infantry dude that can go in a link team that has a missile launcher, and he's called a Tonko, and he has wrecked so much face. There are several of our local people who cringe at his sight of that model being placed on the table because he has wrecked so much face. That model in that faction performs at that level because of the stuff that's in that faction as a support. A model of the equivalent may not perform the same way in your faction. So part of it is knowing how you play and knowing how your opponent plays and knowing the pieces you can put on the table, right? It's not chess where every queen is the same. That is part of the thing I think which makes Infinity interesting, is because you can't pull a net list. All missile launchers, all rocket launchers, all HMGs have the same stats. It's the models that use them and the way that they are used that makes them effective.
Oh, totally agree. And as we are starting to see more things that are coming out with N4, our local Infinity group on Facebook, Mike Moran did a wonderful breakdown of the things that he had seen for Haqqislam so far. And one of the things that kept coming up with that was AP marksman rifle, AP this, AP this. And to Mike's credit, he has looked at it from a different point of view and seen that armor is going to be a big, big thing, right? The tag out in the open is going to be the one time that you're sure going to want that AP marksman rifle and an ARO to take that, crack shot. And that's where I think Pano really excels, is because they've all got hyper-power armor.
So I think you're right. And I think that Pano having that armor, I think that when you're a newbie and you're looking at lists, and I think sometimes I know I fall in the trap. I fall into it all the time, which is I want to play what nobody else has. I want to play, I want to be the guy that shows up. And Ryan and I have talked about this. We've all talked about this, where wow, we have like 4 of this and 2 people playing this in our gaming community, but nobody's playing this. I want to try it, and then you quickly realize why nobody's playing it, because it's a hard game on hard mode, and it's difficult. You'll see why there's so many Yujing and so many Pano players, because it really is. It's got some give to it, but you're right. You're never going to find that net list, because I know that when I start making a list, I'll have an idea of what I want to do, and then I try to put models in that list build. I am a former military guy, and I'm an old school airborne grunt, and I look at where's my base of fire going to come from, in Infinity. And I know this isn't a real life military, air quotes game where it's, this is how it is. But in my mind, tactically speaking, I look at where's my base of fire, where's like an assault team going to come from, if I'm playing a balanced list. And I think Pano does cover that for me. And I enjoy that when I wish list, and Ryan and I have talked about it, and I know Rob does it. He just doesn't say it. But when you're making lists in the middle of the night going, God, can I buy this? I could definitely do this. A couple $100, I could have a Pano force, and they could do this for me. That's what I enjoy about it. And that's why I really, like if I were talking to somebody, I would say, like, this is, like you said, this is my toolbox army, and pick the road you want to go down. And when we decide to talk about sectorials, you'll see that when you jump into vanilla anything, if you start liking a playstyle more and more, you just hop in that sectorial, and it's going to do that one thing a little bit better.
No, I agree. And I think with any vanilla force, you're going to have so many choices to choose from, because that's the whole point between vanilla and sectorials. Vanilla, you got all the things. Sectorials, you got some of the things, but some of the things do, magic missile launcher trick better.
Yeah, but so I have another question for you both, because when you go on the website and you go on Army Builder, vanilla forces, I mean, it's overwhelming, right? With how many, because you get all the choices, you get everything. So how do I kind of narrow those selections down, or do I because I don't want to have like paralysis of this decision do you guys recommend people narrowing down that vanilla list, or do you embrace the 30 something choices you have?
Oh, well, it's both, right? You don't narrow it down by like, okay, well, I'm only going to use the infantry. I mean, you can, but that's not right. What you do is you narrow it down by like, what role do I need to fill? So I'm going to have 2 killers. So I'm going to have 2 people who probably have really good ballistic skill, have really good armor, have really good weapons like an HMG or a Spitfire, right? Those are going to be my killers. Those are the people that I'm going to Rambo, as we like to call it, spend a bunch of orders on. And their whole purpose is they go up the field and they kill as much stuff as they could possibly kill. And then I'm going to have I need to achieve the mission, right? So that's going to be my forward observers, my hackers, right? People that can go and push buttons or whatever this objective is. Though I need those guys, right? Because remember, you can win when all your models are dead as long as you've achieved the mission and your opponent has not, right? So achieving the mission should be one of the priorities. And then you're looking at support, all right? How am I going to support this? Well, if I'm going to have a Rambo dude running up, I want a doctor. But if I have a doctor who's really wimpy and stuff, he's going to be sitting in the back, and my Rambo dude's going to be up in the middle of the field. How's my doctor going to heal
get
him?
in there?
Yep. So you got to think about how you're going to solve that puzzle. Like Rob and I refer to it a lot of times as puzzles. Like how you're going to solve this puzzle. So when you start building a list, literally you start figuring out what pieces. Now I'm going to go back to my Akari, right? Because that was the last group I really played, and I really liked them. When I originally started playing them, it was for a fluff reason and for a couple of the models and some conversion ideas that I had. I will say Akari is probably one of the bad guys because they do everything for profit. I did not take the Tonko missile launcher that I spoke about earlier. My first builds didn't have him because that seemed like such a crutch unit. It was such an easy add for somebody who could do a ton. Now, I did that for quite a while, played without him, and then I was like, I'm going to play some games with him. And okay, I can 100% understand why people put this in their list almost every time because he wrecks face, right? So when you're building your army, it is 100% possible. Like, I'm going to include this model simply because he wrecks face. Like that's his whole role is this, right? It is also in some of the cases that I've played in some models, I'll include a model because I simply really like the fluff behind that model. I've mentioned before, I'm going to do it Tunguska Nomad Sectorial. It's 100% because of the fluff of the Hollow Men, right? That's it. So my list is going to take Max AVA Hollow Men, whatever that may be, in a week, 2 weeks when we find out what it is, right? So that is also the cool thing about Infinity. That is 100% a legit reason to build a force or how to build a force is simply because this is the coolest model I've ever seen, and I'm going to take as many of those as possible.
To speak to the idea of the role, I don't know how many times I've played a game against, either Ryan or Mike Gleason, Wolver Mike as we call him, or Mike Moran, or any of the normal local guys that we have here in Kansas City, and
or any of the mics.
Yeah, because we got a lot of mics. But I will have a guy, he will have a role, and then as soon as he is done doing that thing, right? Ekdromoy hacker drops in, hacks, Dan Windler's Mo Wang, does a whole bunch of things with that. Yeah, okay. I'm done with this guy. He has played his role. And, Dan, to his credit, will be like, I'm going to kill that guy. He gets that tunnel rage. The next thing you know, he's hunting that Ekdromoy hacker that's over on the side because, he screwed up Dan's plan. Dan wants revenge. I'm like, that guy's done with his role. I am now moving on to the rest of my cast of role players. I think that is one of the best things about Infinity once you get into it. But until you get into it and you play, with that action pack, that starter pack, the Code 1, and you understand that there's going to be a toolbox, a literal, cornucopia of things, a plethora of things. And until you, start playing the game, it's super hard to theory craft what you don't know.
Sure. I mean, I totally get that. And I think the big deal is, for a new player is discern their level of competitiveness. Like, are you you coming hardcore? Are you a hard charger? Are you a fluff person? Are you, what's your motivation behind the game, and what are you trying to do? And then you can kind of push them down that path, on building a list. And I think that that's a very clever way of always helping people build lists. While we're talking about building lists and the things that we really enjoy, let's talk about the model line of Pano and how they look. And you'll usually see them online as they're usually painted blue or like some creams to them, but Pano is blue, right? Like, I mean, but feel free to paint them any way you want. Okay, you do polka dots if you want. So don't ever think that you have to paint a faction based off of a color on a box. But they do look very bulky. Is that the word I want to use? Like,
are you saying chunky?
Yeah, chunky. That's probably a good word. I think Pano seems chunky to me. Just the way they're not sleek. Like there's some factions that are sleek. There are some that are boxy. They're not boxy or sleek. They look like humans in big armor. So it's chunky is a good word. Chunky. I like chunky.
Yeah, their armor is rounded, right?
Yeah.
So it's not angular. Yujing is angular. Pano is more rounded. So I can see where you can say that the chunky piece. But I think part of it is, and they all have antennas. That's another thing you'll see from Pano, right? That's an aesthetic deal. They have the head antennas. So, if you're looking through the model line, like I said, that's a consistency and a uniformity piece that they've painted. Corvus Belli has chosen Pano to be blue. Nomads are red, Eugene is orange, Hak Islam is earth, tan colors, right? Ariadne is green, camo, right? So I think, that's just an aesthetic choice that companies will have to make to kind of help identify their stuff, right? So let's look at the model line, talk about some of that stuff and how you kind of go. And this is where knowing what you want to play and knowing what looks cool to you are the two driving factors, right? Pano has a very rich product line. There are lots of models to choose from. There are lots of things to look at. There are lots of paths to go down. How, if you are new or going to be new into Pano, do you figure out what you want to do, right? With all of these choices, it kind of becomes cumbersome in a way. So that's where action packs, starter packs are going to help, right? Because then you're going to at least get your base dudes out. The upside is you don't need 4 boxes of Fusiliers, which are Pano's generic line troop. You're going to have 5, 3 to 5, maybe even none, right? You don't have to use them at all. So if you don't like them. But so it's kind of really just kind of figuring out what box set gets you where you want to go. And that becomes really back to understanding how the game plays and understanding where excel. Pano is going to excel at shooting you, right? They really are. They're gonna excel at, I've got a higher ballistic skill. I want to shoot you. We are not going to excel. I say we because I play Pano. We are not going to excel at getting up in close combat with you and fighting you. There are models that can do that, but that's not where our benefit, where Pano's benefit comes from.
And I also think that also speaks to the fluff, is because there is such a value of human life. It goes to the fanatic aspect of, the religious troop type, but it also speaks to the large volume of tags, huge armor things, and bots, right? The drone bots, the peacemaker bots, the ox bots, the bots.
Yeah, Pano does the remotes really well. You can tell they do the remotes really well because almost every NA2 or mercenary army, the remotes they get are Pano remotes. So apparently in Pano, if your remote gets a scratch on it, it goes to the secondhand lot and gets sold to a mercenary company and you get a new one. But so Pano does a couple things really well. They do heavy armored shooters fairly well. The Yujing does the heavy armor a little better, but Pano does it pretty solidly. Pano does MSV2 vision stuff really well. Pano does solid line troopers pretty well, right? Meaning you have an effect that is not great at everything, or he's not like in a fully armored. He's a normal dude, but he still has a high enough ballistic skill that he can really pull off some great shots, some great maneuvers. Not Not all the armies have really good basic line troopers. Some of them are like, this guy's going to sit and he's going to hide in a corner. He's going to do nothing unless there's absolutely no other choice. In Pano, you can take your basic Fusilier and really push him and try to pick off some stuff. He's probably not your first choice, but he's still going to be a solid choice if you need to do it.
Right, and I think Pano has awesome heavy infantry. The heavy infantry, the tags, and the bots. I think back to when we first started playing, you and I, Ryan, at your house on your dining room table. It was just amazing games. And I remember trying to crack the heavy armor of your knights and just failing time and time again. Or I would succeed in my shot, and you would make that armor save because you've got the armor, you're in cover, and just being so frustrated. And it was such an amazing time. When it comes to picking an army, Pano is by far and away, you can't go wrong. Where you're going to go wrong is, bad dice rolls, and you're not going to be able to help that. Where you're going to go wrong is being like, well, I liked him at first, but now I like these guys better because I understand the game mechanics.
Yeah, and so also, you go back into that, and not to kind of pull back what you said is like being super frustrated, but not in a negative way, right? So don't get distracted. People that are listening, don't get like, oh, he's frustrated to play. No, it was frustrating. Like, oh, I can't solve this puzzle, but I'm still having a really good time playing this game, right? It's not out of my reach. But I think my other train of thought that I completely lost now, the other piece to think about is really cool is like maybe the pieces you are using, the way that you are using them is not the most efficient way. Forcing yourself out of like, this guy has heavy armor and a heavy machine gun, and he should sit back here and shoot everything, and he just keeps dying. I can't figure it out. Well, maybe you need to force him up the field a little bit more. Maybe you need to press your luck differently, right? So that in Pano, I think where you were go back earlier, you have some flexibility and some forgivenesses. In some cases, those heavy armors, like I can go back to a game that Rob and I played where I took a Father Knight, which is a heavy infantry. They are no longer called Father Knights. He had a Spitfire, right? So we're talking about a really strong, really powerful, really high blood skill Spitfire guy, which is a really strong
killer
weapon.
piece.
So it's like a mid-ranged killer weapon, right? And that dude just mowed stuff down. Like he forced into the midfield, mowed stuff down, killed a bunch of stuff. Now the downside of that is that's great. I killed a bunch of Rob Singh, right? But I still have to achieve the mission. The also thing to be careful of is you can get distracted by taking this really strong, because you're like, oh, this guy's got heavy armor, and you put him way up there, and he's now alone in the middle of the field or on your opponent's side, and it's your opponent can now just pick him apart. That is the trap that heavy infantry fall into, is people think they're invulnerable because this guy's stats are really good. Nothing is invulnerable. So when looking at Pano, it's going to be really strong. Their knights is a religious order group, which we'll talk more about when we talk about sectorial stuff, are really strong. They have a bunch of cool things that they can do. They have some restrictions on the way they do them. And then their tech. They typically have some of the best tech. So some of your visors, your weaponry, even some of mines and whatnot. And a lot of this stuff is going to change in a couple of weeks when N4 comes out, because some of this equipment is going to be recategorized. But I think that if you're really looking at Infinity because you like sci-fi special forces, Pano's got you covered. They've got you. That's that. Or if you really want, like, I want this religious fanatic leading this ragtag bunch of ne'er-do-wells, that's them. That's Pano. That's you. You got that. I mean, that's my thoughts.
I also think that all of the things that you just said go back to the reason why they are called the hyperpower. They are number one space. They're number one in military sort of tech. They've got all the MSV. They hand it out like it's candy. While some of this stuff is going to change rules-wise, I think the fluff still remains.
I mean, I think you're right. If you're a fluff player, if you really want to like something simply because the fluff, that's a different piece, right? I started Pano, right, because I had the 2-player starter set, so it's Pano and Nomad. And when I started looking at it, I really wanted to take the military orders, which is one of their sectorials, which is the knights. That's the knights requirement. So think about the Knights of the Crusade era.
Yeah.
Now up to futuristic knights. They're serving more, but they're not necessarily crusading, but they're serving more purpose. They're almost like a religious police force, if that makes any sense. They have different houses that orders that they come from that do different things. I did refer to them as the murder Catholics, right? Not to offend any of our Catholic people out there, but hopefully you'll understand what I'm talking about, just because it's these people in knights that are just going around and with heavy armor and machine guns. Some of my favorite models come from that side, like the Crusader Brethren. Not really models, like model choices in the game was a Crusader Brethren, which is their combat drop troop dude. He either comes on and wrecks face or comes on and dies immediately. Those are the only two things that model that unit entry has ever done for me, and for some reason I love that dude. I put a Spitfire on him. If I'm playing military orders, and you can probably 90% of the time suspect that there's a Crusader brother with a Spitfire in my list, because I just love that dude. But it's that he either wins big or he loses big. Definitely something that, to me personally, that I think is really cool about the military, or about the Pano thing, is you can latch on to a model or a unit entry type and have them do what you want them to do sometimes, and not do what you want them to do sometimes. People think they're really cool.
So Ryan, with that, you talk about the Crusader Brethren. Is that one of the models that kept you in or enticed you into playing Pano?
No, actually, it did not. The idea of the military orders, the knights, the idea of heavily armored futuristic knights, I thought was really cool. And so that's what really kind of got me into Pano. As I played and progressed, there were a couple models that I really, really liked, both as the unit and as the actual model. One of those was the Crusader Brethren. The other one is the Black Friar. The Black Friar is a really cool model to me, a really cool unit to me, the MSV2. And that's kind of like what, like, the model's really cool, the unit entry is really cool. Crusader Brethren I really like. So those are the two that I really, model wise, really dig. I also like some of the models and the entries for some of the remotes. Like Pano can do remote heavy, and that's what I was playing at the end of when I was playing Pano, was a lot of remote heavy. I would take 3 to 4 to 5 remotes. And I really kind of liked that idea of, like, we're Pano, we have all this technical superiority, so we are not going to use our people. We're going to send these little remote dudes out. So those models, I still think the Pano remotes hold up, even though they've got new remote models now. They're cool. I think the old ones are still really neat. So to me, model wise, that's really what I think is probably the coolest of the Pano to me, is the Blackfriar, the Crusader Brethren, the remotes, both brand new.
Gotcha. And when we were preparing for this episode, and the question of, let's talk about the model range, it is so vast. Because of its vastness, to me, it was, okay, well, what models have I seen Ryan bring to the table that I thought was really, really cool? And so I started looking at the bots, because, like you said, there towards the end, when you were playing Pano, you were bringing a ton of bots, and the Oxbot Peacemaker by far and away was the one thing, probably because you had that great alpha strike and just nuked me on your first turn. And then I started thinking about it, I was like, but that's not really the model that trips my trigger when I look at models that I would want to paint. And the models that I would want to paint, that I would consider, being the siren's call, if you will, for me to play Pano, is the Helot Militia. And the reason why the Helot Militia is where I'm wanting to go is because they're alien. They are lizards. I love the idea of Varuna. This water world is, overrun with an indigenous amphibious race. And I think that as I look at the Helot Militia box set and the 4 models that come in it, those are just, hands down the most sci-fi looking models for Pano.
All right. Well, first of all, they are fish people. They are not lizards.
Whatever.
So, and secondly, that's the funny part about that is they are probably the most un-Pano of the Pano, right? Because they, like you said, they're an alien, uh, alien to us. They're coming from their home
I was gonna
world,
say
right?
they're indigenous on Varuna.
Yeah, they're indigenous from Varuna. But it is kind of cool, and it does kind of go to the aspect of Pano. If you like the Helots, like they also have the Libertos, which is basically the freedom fighters for the Helot group, so, which are, so most other people could take the Helots also, or those models. So if you were looking at this, and I'm just going to ask you this specifically, Rob, because I like it, but so is it just those models, or is it those models in Pano?
I think it's those models in Pano. I've got 2 of the ITS Libertos Freedom Fighters, and I love them. And they have been on the back burner for 8-9 months now. And I mean, they're completely assembled, completely primed, but they're on the back burner because I want to do them so much justice that I've literally gone through, like various freshwater fish and saltwater fish pictures on Google so that I can try to figure out what color scheme I want to paint them.
Okay, so I'm gonna circle back to my question here. So you are liking them because of the model themselves, not necessarily the model in Pano. The model themselves you really like. Since we're talking Pano, have you looked at the way they function within Pano, or is it simply because those are cool models?
So the answer to that is yes. So looking at the Helot box with the shock marksman rifle, the multi-sniper, the Red Fury, and the submachine gun, I like how I think it's either the Red Fury or the sniper rifle, that model is coming around. Its tail is out, and it's got the fins on its arms. It looks so good that even if I didn't play this game, I would want to paint that model just because.
Yeah, so you like the models, not necessarily the models in Pano. You like the models. So my question is, so the reason I bring it up is because in Pano, like the form of the Helots that you see is not typically the sniper rifle, right? It's the guy with the rocket launcher who's hidden, right? Which is super effective in Varuna.
True.
So to me, and my question then would be to use like, as a Pano model to play Pano, I'm going to disqualify the Helot, right? Because their specific role is different than the model you like, right? The role they're going to play does not really affected by the models that you like. Does that make sense?
But I can proxy them, so I can paint them
well, yeah,
up.
I mean,
yeah.
Yeah, but we're talking Pano here, so I want to pull you back in, and I'm going to pull Randy back into this too. So Randy, if you're looking at Pano and you had $50 to spend, right, and you can buy a box set of Pano, have you looked at it? What models would appeal to you, and then what do you think you could do with those models, like not painting wise, playing wise, and then to Rob, and I'll let Randy answer first. Rob, so taking the Helots, and let's just take all of the mercenaries out. So the Ninja, Lankai, let's take those out. What Pano model do you like that you would also like the way they function in the game? So Randy, go.
So I'm buying Knights. That's just where I'm going with that. So I'm probably buying, I don't know, probably Knights Spitlars. I'm probably buying those. I'm probably gonna get Joan of Arc, which puts me at about, well, that put me over 50, but that's kind of where I'd go with it. I honestly, in this part of my gaming life cycle, where I'm at life, I only care about what something looks like, and that's where I want to go. So if I don't like the way the models look, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in anything about it. I don't care. I don't care if it's you could hand me 15 models or 10 models and say this would win every game you played. And if I didn't like the models, I'd be like, all right, well, I mean, keep them. You could give it to me for free and I still wouldn't play it. So for me, it'll always be the rule of cool. And I don't know why, because I'm not a religious guy. I always very much so enjoy certain aesthetics in gaming, and I've always liked, Crusade, that time period. So I enjoy looking at the Pano actually kind of mimics that portion in history. I definitely dig that. I've always really enjoyed some of the female, like I like in Nomads, like the Riot Girls, like aesthetically, I like it a lot. But if you're asking me, once I buy that, spend the $50, I guess I'm gonna spend another 50 to have somebody put it together and paint it for me. So that's where I'm at with that. So I am a horrible hobbyist, and even when I'm like, I'm gonna try it this time, I fail miserably.
Yeah. So the upside of that is the Knights Hospitaller are really good. Like that's a solid unit. I have a couple Joan models. I've had all of the different versions. Joan has a bunch of models out there. I've never put her on the table, and part of that is me. I never wanted to play her. She's too many points for what I wanted to do. It's a whole personal thing. But so the Knights Hospitaller is a great starter, right? That's a great solid foundation. Rob, now I'm going to put that question to you. Taking all the mercenaries out of it, if you were to spend $50 to get into Pano, where do you start roll wise? And then, as you know a little bit more of the game, I think those models would function wise.
So I think playing the game and having $50 to spend, I'm going to probably go with the Zulu Cobra, because let me rephrase that. I'm going to go with the Zulu Cobra that has the jamming device, because I think that model holding the jammer out, it's got a mask on it. It's just a super cool looking model. It's got a hex pattern on its cloak. So all of that stuff appeals to me. I like the idea of having a jammer. I like the idea of having a sensor, at least in N3, to reveal those pesky camouflage models. And then I'm going to go with the a starter set, probably the Knights Hospitaller, because it's a solid starter pack.
Well, it's not a starter pack. That's just a
Is it
model
just
pack. Yeah, it's just 4 model army pack.
Is it just a 4 model army pack?
Yep.
I thought there was what's the military order?
Well, there's a military order starter pack, but it does not have any Hospitaller Knights in it.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
All right, so I have Pano, right? So I don't need the starter pack because I have a lot of Pano. But if I were looking and I'm like, I'm somebody who's going to start in Pano, and I'm going to start specifically with most bang for my buck, right? I would probably look at the Varuna starter pack. It's very well rounded on the models you get out of that. The generic Pano vanilla starter pack is also really solid, but those are probably the two where I would start if I were looking. And I was going to start playing Pano. Those would be the 2 starter packs that I would look at the most. The Varuna, simply because the models are newer. They're more in the current design aesthetic they like. So they've just got some really sweet models in it. Now, the Pano starter is an older starter. However, the models that are still in that are still really good model-wise. I'm looking for it real quick, and I can't find it because it's not on the website.
No, the old Pano starter pack or the Varuna? Because the Varuna's on there because I'm looking at it right now.
Yeah, the Varuna is, but I can't find the original Pano. But it will be re-released here shortly. It will be one because it's a Code 1 army. So the action pack for Pano will be out, and that will be a really very solid starting place for Pano. Yep. So they don't have the action pack up on their site yet to show what's in it. But if you're looking at Pano, the Code 1 action pack that should come out before the end of the year should probably have all you need to really get going in Code 1 and in N4. Guessing by what they have on for the O12 and the Combined Army action pack, you're looking at probably going to be about 10 models in there. So again, it's going to be a solid, well-rounded force.
The action packs, from what I've seen on the website, are very much the most bang for your buck that you can get.
Now, granted, those are more than $50, so I did break my own rule there, but just pointed that out. So, well, I'm trying to think if there's anything else model-wise that we want to talk about for Pano. I know we haven't gone a real deep history of Pano. We've kind of talked a little bit about what they're playing like, what they look like, kind of what us to it, what new players to it. But is there anything else we want to chat? Do you have any other questions, Randy?
I don't think so.
All right, wait a time.
I don't think so. I think you guys. I mean, like, I'd say you guys covered it. I mean, like, that was pretty much where my head was at. So
cool. All right. Well, do we want to give a shout out to Tabletop Game and Hobby in Overland Park, Kansas, for sponsoring us as we talk about the Infinities?
I mean, does that count as the shout out right there?
Yeah, I think it counts as a shout out, and then I'll.
Yeah, I mean, if you're gonna ask us if we want to do a shout out by doing a shout out, I think that you've already defeated the purpose of asking us to do the shout out.
Well, so one of the things that I was anticipating was the traditional lead in, where in the last 3 episodes, Randy has talked about tabletop, and I was going to talk about how important it is to support local businesses during this pandemic, because, I mean, let's be honest, it's kind of crazy out there right now, and being able to have the support of a local game shop like Tabletop is super important for us, so that way when all of the insanity dies back down, we nerds, we geeks, we gamers have a place to land and start playing games again.
So
nice.
True.
Second that.
So true. All right. Well, I think we're good. I think we're on a roll here, buddies.
I think we are. That. I mean, we're knocking them out. We're back and better than ever.
It's a little scary.
It is a little scary. Well, until next time, we will see you guys same time, same bat channel next Monday.
Yeah. Take care, everybody. Have a good week.
Dice with fickle bitches.
Background music. Flying species. The yellow flying cock. The use of these human works of music is granted under the current Creative Commons license terms and agreements. From the freemusicarchive.org, from the artists as listed. Thank you.
Tabletop Game and Hobby, located at 9156 Metcalf Avenue in Overland Park, Kansas, zip code 66212, has for over 25 years been the Kansas City area's premier game store, specializing in non-electronic games, carrying a massive variety of board games, miniature games, role-play games, classic games, and gaming accessories. Stop by, see what we have to offer, or give us a call at area code 913-962-4263, or visit us online at tabletopgameandhobby.com.